welcome back. Over the afternoon, I want to go through and just spend a bit of time showing you FrameMaker, playing with it a little bit. It's not going to be in depth. I just want you to think about ideas that are in here and how they might apply on some of the other things that we've talked about over the morning, or for even the people who are from Rockwell that were there yesterday when I did a session. Bear in mind, I'm touching the software, scratching the surface on it, but I want you to think about some of the best practices. So that includes things like using styles. Consistent style use makes all the difference when it comes to working with software. If you are launching FrameMaker for the first time, and hopefully it launches successfully on the machines in here, if you want to give it a shot, you can just do the, it's Windows 10, so you can just start typing in FrameMaker and you should see 2019 and be able to launch the software on these machines. And the same thing for the people at home. If you try launching the software from your remote location, I'll just give you a moment to open the software. And as you're doing that, I'm going to go in and talk about it a little bit. You do not yet have to do anything, but I want you to have a hands-on opportunity for the work. Part of it is that it's the afternoon and it starts to get a little slower into the afternoon. We've had the lunch, we've had the cookies, the caffeine from the morning might be wearing off a touch. This gives us an opportunity to jump in and do things instead of just discuss them. So once you are logged in, once you've launched FrameMaker, and you do not need to do this yet, I'll go back to it in a moment, but in the preferences, there's several things that you can set up, and it's a one-shot setup. You don't have to configure it every single time. That'll be one piece that I walk you through. The other is just thinking about how FrameMaker works, because it does work a little differently than Microsoft Word. The FrameMaker tool generally is used to create content, to publish content, similar to Word. Differences, yesterday when we were at Rockwell, I took a Word document that had numbering, and I just reorganized stuff, and the numbering just fell apart. Frame doesn't do that, not once it's set up properly. If you are doing large documentation, I don't know, for Microsoft Word users, what's a large document? What do you consider to be something where you start to question the stability?
100 pages.
One page, 100?
Yeah,
100 pages?
2 paragraphs.
2 paragraphs?
500 pages.
Yeah, 500 pages. I've done a single FrameMaker document just because somebody was crazy. It was almost 10,000 pages, one document. It was the parts. We had opened up an entire parts listing for, I think it was a 747 as one file. It was massive and it didn't make any sense. We actually had to leave for lunch and then come back afterwards, and the file had opened up. We didn't actually do anything with it. I was done. I said, all right, what do you want me to do with it? And the guy says, oh, nothing. I just wanted to see if it would open it. It did. It converted everything into a FrameMaker document. It had been tab delimited information, and we converted it to a table, which was kind of neat. I've never seen a table that large. It was about, well, it was the entire parts. It was about 14,000 pages, but it was the entire parts list by the time it was tabled for a 747. I think it was a 747, could have been a 727, 737. It was for a plane, every part that went into it. The largest document that I've recently opened up was around 600 pages. That's in the last week or two on here. And that's pretty cool as well, just to be able to see it. It started off as a bunch of XML files, and we went through and ran scripts in order to make it do things. The install of FrameMaker should have things like file, new, etc. It also has a set of sample documents, and I'll play with the sample documents a little bit so that you can try things. My goal, I want to show you how to create a document, how to set up a little bit of conditional content. It'll be a very simple, almost goofy little document, and then we'll publish it so that you can see what the HTML output looks like. But as we do this, we'll set up some cool functionality. And if you build the document up a little bit, you can start to show some really interesting features to people, whether it's for those that are looking at their own business. This might be something where you decide you want to be able to show specific types of information to specific audiences. We'll do that. Other things that you may decide to do. Somebody was mentioning working very much in a code markdown type of an environment. The DITA environment is XML based. When you open an XML file, if it's based on a standard, you can do transformations. So imagine having the entire United Nations available to you. Anything you say in English can be translated into any other language. XML and DITA let you do something similar to that, where you could create content, open it in any software tool that's DITA aware, but you could also take that content and transform it so that it becomes a Word document, so that it becomes an HTML file, so that it becomes a PDF document from that source code. Elements, attributes, values that are assigned to them. If you've ever worked with HTML, you might be familiar, even if it's just the most basic passing HTML, you may have seen things like image, source equals, height equals, width equals. Image would be an element. Attributes are things like the height and the width of the source. And then the value would be a height of 2 inch, a width of 3 inch, and the source is US flag .jpeg. That's the type of thing that happens behind the scenes. What you would see in FrameMaker is, here's your picture. So we'll look at a couple of those different things. But to get started, I want to make sure everybody's got the software launched. So here in the room, I think everybody's got it launched successfully. That was a,
Yeah, it's still doing the license agreement.
Oh, okay. And for home, I'm just going to check the chat.
It's going. It's
Just checking the chat, and FrameMaker up and running for those who are playing along at home. Just checking the chat. Yes, no, FM. I'll just keep an eye on the chat, see if something pops up. If it's not working for you, I will try to troubleshoot. Here in the classroom, I'll be able to walk around and provide a little bit of support. And again, I'm just going to get you to do some basic stuff. So for those that have it open, under Edit, choose Preferences for a moment, please. Anytime that you install software for the first time, you get all of the factory defaults. I just want you to have a chance to see what some of them are, and I'm going to ask you to change one or two, and I'll explain why. The Preferences has this set of options down the side: General, Interface, Alerts. I'm just going to General, and I'm leaving most of this. You should have Structured FrameMaker. Don't worry about changing this. It's a superset. If you have Structured FrameMaker, you get everything that FrameMaker has on its own and the functionality of the structured interface. So there's really no point in turning this off. The automatic backup on save, you'll see that mine does not have the checkbox and yours does. I'm pretty sure yours has the checkbox. I hate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, the backup does not do what I expect a backup to do. It does exactly what the developers created it to do, but it was created years ago. So the backup is basically, hey, sometimes you open up a file and you save it and you didn't mean to. Or you open a file that you created in January and it's now August, you work with it and you save it and you go, whoops, didn't mean to do that. The automatic backup creates a duplicate of the last saved version. But if you work with a file and you regularly save it, or you often go through and have a network doing a backup, you don't really need this. I turn it off so that I don't end up with a duplicate of every file in the exact same folder that it exists. It just annoys me to have it there. Some people like this, I don't, so I turn off automatic backup on save. It'll also make your folders a little cleaner when you go in to take a look at them later. That's the big one inside here. If you go to the interface, which is the second option, you also have icons. I use the default, so I have grayscale icons, but you can also have color icons, depending on your preference. I hardly ever use anything on the toolbar anymore, so in my case, it doesn't even matter which one exists. I see them and I just ignore them. But some people like to see color for the icons so that you have blue this, yellow that, green the other thing. Up to you. Bunch of other pieces in here. The only one I really want to also draw your attention to is the CMS. And the CMS allows you to go in and work with Documentum, SharePoint, DITA Exchange, or the Adobe Experience Manager. And I have my own AEM environment set up. This would be for content management. So any of these allow you to have files, check files in, check files out, open a document, modify a document, manage all of your path locations between content pieces inside the content management system. Just nice to know that it's there. Most of the rest of the stuff I'm not going to bother with. You can check it in more detail if you ever want to. If you choose OK, if you've changed a couple of core things like the icons or the backup, you'll be prompted to restart FrameMaker. So go ahead, just restart it, exit and restart Frame. That'll bring you back to pretty much exactly what I have here, but it is a one-shot deal making that kind of a change. You do not need to go back every single time that you launch FrameMaker and redo this. All right. Anybody still waiting for their machine to restart or to start for the first time? All right. Some of the stuff that I'm showing is going to be very basic. You're already familiar with it. I'm going to put together some silly examples because I just want to create some content and show you functionality, not focus on typing. So I'm going to ask everybody to choose File, New, Document. And Frame has a couple of default templates. We're just going to go with a very generic document, so File, New, Document. And at the very top of this dialog is a button that says Portrait. Go ahead and click it. If you wanted to, at the very bottom, you can explore standard templates, which has some sample files. You can go through the FrameMaker installation directory, which has samples. I'm just going to walk you through creating stuff totally from scratch. Here's my interface, which may look different than yours. So the first thing I want to mention is that Frame has workspaces. This is something that Photoshop and Illustrator, InDesign, other tools from Adobe also have. What it lets you do is set up what you see on the screen the way you want it. So if I go through here and I choose Authoring, or I click the drop down and I choose Design, or I click the drop down and I choose XML Structured, it gives me a set of predefined objects that are on the screen in specific areas. Sometimes they don't line up with what you're expecting to see because you've gone in my case, and already customized. So if I go to the authoring one, I'm also going to reset the workspace, which puts everything back to sort of its default work environment and should look similar to what you have for your authoring environment. So if I go in here and I start to work with the software and I realize there's certain things that I do a lot, what I can do is make sure that the objects that support me are showing, the ones I don't need are hidden, and then later on, and I will not have you do this right now, but later on I can come through here and I could save my own custom workspace so that I get all the things that I need to work with. In a lot of cases, people then say, so why would you ever have more than one workspace? Depending on the role that you're playing, when you open up a file, you might be doing a review and you want to see one set of things, but you might also be going through and inserting and manipulating images and you need different things. For example, with graphics, I might want to go in and show all of my graphics toolbars, and I want to show things that allow me to position multiple images on the page so that I can align them top, bottom, left, right, etc. If I'm doing a review, I may want to have things like my conditional text showing so that I can show and hide author notes. Each of those takes up real estate on the screen. And by customizing, I can decide what I see on the screen. In other cases, at home, for example, I have a second monitor. So when I hook up to dual monitors, I can have a workspace that I save that puts a bunch of stuff in one screen and other pieces in my main screen. And then when I go to a second environment where I don't have that monitor, or I have different resolutions or anything else, I can save it. So it's really handy if you're on a laptop or if you have to perform different functions. If it turns out that almost everything you're doing is day-to-day writing, then maybe it turns out that having the authoring environment is all that you need. You have the option, though, to configure and customize these. We'll play with it a little bit, but to get started, I want to do hands-on. So let's take a look quickly under View. I like showing borders, text symbols, and rulers early on. So I'm going to turn on all three of those: View Border, View Text Symbols, View Rulers. And what I now see on the screen is the rulers across the top and down the side. I see a dotted line, and I see the end of text flow symbol. Looking at the ruler, I can see that this page is set up to be, give or take, 8.5 by 11. It has some toolbars across the top. It has an area where my insertion point is happily blinking on and off. Yours might be backwards and blinks off then on, but I'm pretty forgiving about those things. I'm just checking to see if anyone's actually trying to figure out on their system.
If you're left-handed.
Right, yeah. The left-handed side was kind of a fun one because at one point when we were writing documentation, we would be telling people to left-click and right-click. And what I've done, and I think a lot of people have done this over the years, is I changed it to clicking the primary or the secondary mouse button. Because left-handed people, I have a good friend who's a lefty, and his line is lefties have rights too. So.
I get it.
All right. A couple of quick troubleshooting things. If you click in the margin of the page, so outside of the text area, you'll see that your insertion point no longer blinks. If you look in the bottom left of your screen, you'll see a blank gray space. And then if you click in any part within the dotted line, if you click once, you'll see at the bottom it reads Flow A, and then it has the Pilcrow, the backwards letter P, and the word body. This is telling you you're in the main text area, and the paragraph you're working with is called body, which is similar to the normal paragraph in Word. This is your day-to-day writing. I'm going to show you a couple of different shortcuts, but one of the things hopefully everybody does with style-based writing is you work with Word, you work with Google Docs, and in FrameMaker, and you assign things like a title or a heading 1 or a heading 2, rather than I think I will arbitrarily make this bold plus italic, or I will make it 18 point instead of 12. While those options exist on the toolbar here, they're a bad idea. Just don't use them even though they exist. Bold, italic, Times New Roman, 12 point. Instead, we're going to work with catalogs, and you'll see that the catalogs here are a little different than the one in Word. Word mixes together. It shows you everything. FrameMaker has a catalog specific to the styles for paragraphs and another one specific to the one for characters. In Word, you can overlap the styles. In Frame, it's in one catalog or the other, so you know exactly what you're getting. I'm going to ask you to type in a couple of relatively basic things. So let's do this. Saving documents, and then press enter. Files can be stored for future recovery. Once reopened, they can be modified, printed, and saved again. There we go. Boring, there's some text. The only reason I'm getting you to type it in, I don't have any specific content in mind right now. I'm just typing something because I want to get to the point where we can say, on a Mac, you do this, on Windows, you do the other thing. Our 19-year-old had expressed an interest in trying to do some computer coding. So we looked things up, we found him a book, and inside the book, one of the first things they did was they said, you've got to be set up so that you have the JDK, Java Developers Kit, set up on your machine. And then it said, here's how you do it. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And partway through it said, if you're on a Mac, do this and this. If you're on a Windows machine, do that and the other thing. And I thought, write it twice. Write me, here's how you do it on a Mac. Write me, here's how you do it on a Windows machine. Because as we were going through, we realized that some of the steps for the Mac were no longer being properly labeled as if you're on a Mac. So we'd try to do something on the PC and it wouldn't work. And we did this for quite a while with the version that they suggested we work with, and finally gave up. And he said, programming's stupid. And my wife said, you know, IBM also uses the JDK environment. So why don't you try our Java Developers Kit and install it? And it was written and it said, oh, you're on a Windows machine, here's what you do. And he installed it and had it up and running in about 5 or 10 minutes. So very quick, very easy if you show the right information. Here I'm going to do a simple example. We'll put in a couple of steps, but then we'll put in initially some information that says, if you're on a Mac, you do this, and if you're on a Windows machine, do that. We will fix that later. And what I'll do is I'll show you how to publish that and create a web page so that you can say, what do you want to see? And somebody can toggle on and say, show me the Mac or show me the Windows version, and your user gets to pick. It's a very basic example, but it's a very powerful one. And it's something that I do with my clients where I can go to them and say, yeah, I can take your content and set it up so that if you have similar product, you can write once and you can reuse it. You just need to do it right the first time around. This can be done in FrameMaker using its native capability right out of the box. It can also be done with structured authoring using DITA. I want to show you a bit of both, and we're going to do it here inside FrameMaker. So I press enter. Saving documents, files can be stored. So now I've got a title, I've got a little blurb inside here, and now I'm going to write the most generic way that I can on how to save files so that this applies to any software that you can possibly think of. So the first thing I'm going to do is select File, Save As, and I put a little symbol in between there, however you want to do it. If you write commas, etc., it doesn't matter to me. Then I press enter, select a location, choose a file type, name the file, click save, and I press enter so that I can move on to my next topic, which is let's do saving with new names or to new locations. And I press enter, and I'm just going to type blah blah. because this is where I would continue to write, hey, if you're doing a file save as, you do something different. The second time around, you don't necessarily need to do all of these things. Maybe I have a piece on how to print. Maybe I have a piece on how to open and close, whatever it is that I want to write about. All I need is the first piece of information that's in here, though, so that we can get started. Let's click up in the phrase saving documents. Single click. The options for how you do things are pretty broad. In Microsoft Word, you have a couple of different keyboard shortcuts that would allow you to assign a heading 1 or a heading 2. In Google Docs, you have a couple of keyboard shortcuts. FrameMaker has a bunch of different shortcuts as well. Don't do any of this yet. I'm just going to show you so that you can see a bunch of the different options, and then I'll let you know which one I usually use and why. This is the one I never use. I can come up here and I click once. Then I come down here and I click in title. So that's 2 clicks in order to get to this. And then if I decide I want to change this text, I come up 1 click and I make it back into a body, 2 clicks. That's a lot of work. That's 2 clicks. If I could cut that in half, that would be much better. I'd be 50% more efficient. Just by getting rid of a single click, I could double the productivity when it comes to doing goofy little things like clicking. And that on its own is not that all that helpful. But there's a paragraph catalog which I can open up by the side here, or I'm just going to click the double chevrons to hide it. I can go in under View, and within View, work my way through pods and try to find different things, and there is paragraph catalog. Or I can try Format and come down to Paragraph, and there's Paragraph Catalog. So I have a lot of different ways to get to the paragraph catalog. One of them is to press 4 separate keys, the Escape, and then in lowercase as unique keystrokes, O for open, P for paragraph, C for catalog. In any case, it opens up the paragraph catalog, it pops it out, and now in the catalog, if I click and I highlight some of this saving documents, I can single click title or I can click body. Look at that, I've just shown you how to improve your efficiency 50%, down to 1 click from 2. Go ahead and try making saving documents into a title. Should be relatively straightforward. You come along, you use the paragraph catalog in whatever way you want. You could also use this drop down and you assign title. Yep, if you right mouse click within your content, you can go to your paragraphs and you can access it. The other one I'm going to show you is this. See the phrase select file save as? I'm going to click somewhere inside it. I'm highlighting a little bit so that it's easier to see it. On your keyboard, function 9, the F9, and that gives you access to your paragraph formats, and you can just start typing in N for numbered and then down arrow to go numbered 1, and then press enter. Numbered 1 restarts the count, the end. It's always a 1. Unlike Word, have you ever taken a numbered list in Word and then you duplicate it and it goes from 1, 2, 3 and you copy it somewhere else in the document and it becomes 4, 5, 6? And then you have to right mouse click and then you tell it to restart and it becomes a 1. But later on, when you take the 2 and 3 and move them back up, they become 7 and 8, even though you have no idea why. FrameMaker uses numbered or equivalent, depending on your template, and it resets the count. So if you then highlight a little bit of select a location, choose name, click save. You highlight those, and again, I'm using function 9, and you make them numbered, they become 2, 3, 4, 5. And numbered always increments 1 more than the previous. And since the previous at the very beginning was the first, the 1, we get a 2, 3, 4, 5. If you were to take the 3, 4, 5 and duplicate it 100 times, you would end up with, eventually 301, 302, 303, or whatever numbers we end up with. So you have a lot of power inside the software when it comes to things like this, but it definitely requires that you set up the template correctly. I equate it a little bit with going in and doing manufacturing. If you're manufacturing something and you set up your assembly line correctly, you will get correct product at the end of it. If you set it up incorrectly, you will still get consistent product out. And if you can identify where the problem is when you are getting problematic stuff out of the assembly line and you fix it, you will move to getting good stuff out of the assembly line. You don't have to go back and try to fix every single thing. FrameMaker does the same thing. It does exactly what you tell it, and sometimes that can be problematic. If my 1 was a numbered instead of a numbered 1, and then I took this whole list and I pasted it under a 17, it would become 18. 19, 20, 21, 22. If I have that numbered 1, which resets it, it will always be a 1. So just a little bit of a primer on some of the functionality. And let's go to the interesting stuff. Number 2 has select a location. I'm going to click there and press enter. And I'll make this next one, which automatically becomes a 3, and it's followed by a 4, 5, 6. I'd like you to make it indented instead. Just a paragraph tag called indented, and watch your 4, 5, 6. They become 3, 4, 5. The numbering does what it's supposed to. It correctly numbers 1 and 2. Indent does not have a numbering. 3, 4, and 5 say continue from the previous, which was a 2 or a 3 or a 4. So far, so good?
Good.
Okay. I'm jumping through some of the stuff that I would normally cover in a 2 or 3 day training course as well, because I want to show you some of the cool stuff that you can do. And a lot of the easy stuff you can find online and pretty quickly jump in and try. So here where it reads select a location, I'm going to type in on a Mac, use the Finder, and on a Windows computer, use the Explorer. This is the first of my dumb content. And it's dumb because as an author or as a business, what I'm doing is I'm saying, oh, well, we support both the Macintosh and the Windows environment, Apple or Microsoft, we don't care. Look at how awesome we are. As a user, if I'm buying your product and installing it, shouldn't your software be aware that it's installed on a Mac? Or your software should be aware that it's installed on a Windows machine or an Android device, and therefore, should it not, there's the text, should it not just not show me the Windows stuff? And right now, I see everything. I see it all. We're going to take this, we're going to save it, we're going to do a couple things with it, and then we'll come back and we'll start tweaking this a little bit. And again, it's nothing fancy, it's just a starting point. But choose File, Save As. Now, yesterday I was at Rockwell doing stuff, so my default folder is still Rockwell, but I'm going to go to the desktop and jump into my STC, which I've misnamed here. I've been doing search engine optimization stuff with clients so long. I also cannot write the word data anymore. I write DITA. Whenever I try, so I write databases instead of databases. Yeah, it's really frustrating when you get into certain, because it's muscle memory. You get into patterns.
Yeah.
So I'm going to call this one saving. There's my FrameMaker document on saving. I would suggest you put it in a location that's easy for you to find, wherever it is, as long as you can get back to it afterwards. Now, here's the cool part. This document, we're going to go in and choose File, Publish. We could do a Save As. We could make it into a different FrameMaker document. We could save it to a couple formats. But the Save As, and I'm going to go in, just so that I have the same thing you have, I'm going to choose New. And I'm just going to save it because I want to have a default here. So bear with me for a second. Again, I've just been doing some stuff with clients. So I'm putting it into here. And is yours called Settings STS in the bottom of that dialog or default?
Default.
All right, so now I have a default STS. And I'm going to make sure that the path, the destination for this is also the folder for my output. So this is my dialog. It's now set up, and I'll talk about the dialog a little bit. The settings file. This is basically like that United Nations. It's going to identify what I have in the FrameMaker document, and based on the mapping, it's going to change the look of things for some output. PDF is going to match my document. It's going to have that same black text, etc. 1, 2, indented paragraph, 3, 4, 5. So if you double click PDF, it generates a PDF document for you, and after a few moments, you end up with a PDF file that you can open up and take a look at. If you have the Adobe Reader on your machine, if you have Acrobat, etc., you can view the output, and you get the world's most boring document. There it is. There might be documents that are more boring, but I'm pretty sure that this is top 5. Just zooming in a little, that's pretty much exactly what we saw in the other environment. It's a PDF document, yawn. File, print. Oh, look, I've got a PDF. It's going to come out of my printer onto a piece of paper. I'm going to send my PDF document to my printing company so that they can print 5,000 copies of this piece of paper. I'm going to take the PDF and put it on the website so that people can download our PDF document and then print a paper copy. That's generally what people see with a PDF document. I'll show you some cool stuff with PDF later using some sample files, but I'm just closing that off. I'm back over inside FrameMaker, and instead I'm going to double click responsive HTML5. It's generating the entire output. It's building web content, and I view the output. It opens up my browser, whatever that browser is, and I now have an HTML5 page. Now this page has a couple of things happening in it. The content still looks familiar, but running down the side, I have a couple of different things. I have some icons, some little tabs for things like table of contents and index. And it is a responsive HTML5. If this was opened up on a phone instead, it would actually look different. What I'll do, I'm just taking the browser window and resizing it. So keep an eye on what I'm doing here, and you'll see the change on my screen. So at this point, it's still sort of tablet-ish sized. You can see that running down the side, I've got the table of contents running across the top. I have responsive HTML5. Now I'm going to make that narrow.
Is that what's doing things?
Oh, if you're getting blocked content, it's probably opening up with Internet Explorer from Microsoft. Yeah, you have to allow blocked content because Microsoft is insanely paranoid, whereas it's usually down at the bottom or the top of the screen. There might be a little pop-up that allows you to I'm just doing troubleshoot for those that are playing along at home. Mine opens up with Chrome.
What's the file you're supposed to open?
Once you have done the generate and you've double-clicked your responsive HTML5, it should allow you to view the output. So I'm just double-clicking responsive HTML once more, and I get this dialog that allows me to view output. The other thing I could do, if I've already done that and closed it, I've got the little eyeglasses in here that allows me to view output. So there it is. Internet Explorer, by the way, is the #1 browser used to download Chrome, so that you don't have to use Internet Explorer. I think #2 is Microsoft Edge, used so that people can download Google Chrome, so that they, just out of curiosity, I'm mocking Microsoft, yes. Out of curiosity, how many people use, for their own browser, use the Microsoft Internet Explorer or equivalent? One. Who uses Chrome? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hands. Firefox? Yeah, I do both Firefox and Chrome most of the time, depending on what I need to do. Yeah, but once you have this content, this responsive HTML5, here's what I want to point out. If I resize this content, as I resize, so imagine I just hit this web page using my tablet or my computer, I might see this with my icons running down the side for navigation. But it's responsive. It adjusts to your screen resolution and your browser size and the tool in the operating system. So if I narrow this as if it's a phone, watch up across the top, I now have my table of contents menu type of environment and my search bar. And I didn't do anything other than create and generate output. And this would work just the same if this document was 100 pages that then needed to be chopped up into 763 different pieces of information that are all stitched together into one website. So building web content, demonstrating is easy. Other things that are often difficult are customizing the look and feel of material when you build output. So I'm going to close this browser window for a second, and I'm back here inside the publish dialog. I've got my responsive HTML, which I just single click, and I have a settings file at the bottom. If you click, you're going to see a little pop-up, and one of the options is to edit. So if you needed to, Rockwell's colors are red, red and black. So I'm going to click edit, red and gray. So I'm going to take a look inside here at what shows up, and it has the outputs and the style mapping. Currently, the layout is this azure blue, which if I click edit, shows me the look and feel of all the different pieces. And visually, I could work my way through this and start to change it. So one of them is the basic settings, and that has the layout source, which shows a layout font. I also have things like the header that I can click, and it points at the background color, which has the blue. So you can go in and you can customize visually the entire look and feel of your HTML output. Now, that's the shell. There's also the content. So if you close this, and up at the top where the style mappings live, so we have outputs and we have style mapping. Style mappings are your paragraphs. So when you switch to style mapping, you could expand your paragraph styles. And one of the things you'll see is numbered and another is numbered 1. So if you wanted to make your first number bold, you could make numbered 1 be bold and numbered moving forward green. And then your 1, select file save as, is bold, and your 2, select a location, is green, and so is 3, 4, and 5, click save. The other text would be just like the other text. So you have a very powerful visual interface to work your way through in order to customize look and feel, and it can be done very quickly. We've worked with a couple of clients where we've used this type of a publish setting between the style mappings and the outputs, and PDF has become really powerful here. In the past, if you wanted to do a bunch of stuff with PDF, you really had to go in and configure each piece of PDF, but now I can go through my general, my marks and bleeds, I can set my security, and if you're working with DITA, you have a couple of additional options, but it's all part of this STS file, the settings file. So I set it and forget it, and then in the future I can come along and I can say, open it up for my OEM partner of Dell. Open it up for my OEM partner of HP. Open it up for my OEM partner of Lenovo. And then I create content in FrameMaker and I publish it using one of those 3 settings files, and I'm done. I now have all my partner output. And if you're using something like the FrameMaker publish server, you can put all that information onto a server, and then for argument's sakes, every Friday at 11:59 p.m., it automatically takes all of your content that's been updated and publishes it for Lenovo using the correct one, for Toshiba, for HP, for Dell, for Sony. You have all of your product in the OEM branding. And over the weekend, on Saturday, it takes all of the information and it uploads it to a test server. And on Sunday, it runs a bunch of automated scripted tests. And on Monday, if everything passes, at 7:59 a.m., it transfers it over to the client site so that at 8 o'clock, the client can say, we have all your updated output from last week. All of the edited changes that were made, etc., are here. So there's ways to automate that entire workflow. Obviously, you want to have humans do a bunch of the testing, etc., etc. But that's one of the things you can do, is automate this and customize the look and feel. I want to show you some more cool stuff with responsive HTML and with FrameMaker, because this combination gets to be really nice. If I take a look, I'm single clicking responsive HTML, I'm using the glasses, and you can see that inside here, the result is one chunk of information that says, on a Mac, use the Finder, and on a Windows computer, use the Explorer. Basic example, I want to set it up so that you can have it read, use the Finder, or use the Explorer, because we know our users are on either a Mac or a Windows machine, and we let the user self-identify and then move forward and view only the content that's relevant. And if that user says, normally I'm on a Mac, but today I'm on a Windows machine, they should be able to just toggle back and forth. Normally, the development for something like that can become pretty involved. You've got a bunch of things to do. We're going to do one-time setup in FrameMaker. So let's go over to the FrameMaker world. I'm going to show you some of the template level stuff. This is not something that I suggest every user do every single day. And I'll let you know where the template stuff is that has to be done once, which is what we're going to do for the next few minutes, and where the active user standpoint of an author is, which we'll do sort of in sync, but then later on, we'll apply it one more time and you'll see how much faster it is once things are set up. On a Mac, use the Finder. On a Windows computer, use the Explorer. Click at the end of that, please press enter. Generalization. If you are working with a given paragraph type, by and large, when you're at the end of it and you press enter, you probably want another of that type, unless it's a heading or a title. FrameMaker has a next paragraph setting. In this case, the next paragraph is the default of repeat. But if I click at the end of saving documents, which is a title, and I press enter, I get a body paragraph, and then I get a body, a body, a body. Same thing as Microsoft Word, same thing as Google Docs. That's just effective template design. But let's type this. Use the Finder. I'm putting in full stop enter. Use the Explorer. There we go. So now I have 3 paragraphs. The first one has both chunks of information. The second is going to be Mac only. The third is Windows only. I'm leaving them all in there for now so that you can see the progression as we make changes. At present, there is nothing in this template that is configured to allow Mac or to allow Windows. So we have to play the role of template developer for a few minutes. Under the insert menu, we have conditional tags. Now there's a couple of different ways that you can work your way through to these pieces. You can go through the view, pods, conditional tags. Again, there's different ways to get to this thing, but the only one that's in here right now is something called comment. Comment is a default that's included in this template. You will not see it in every single FrameMaker template, the same way that in every single Word template or Google Doc environment, you don't see all of the tag names. Somebody created this at some point in time. We're going to create more. So we're pretending right now to be the people who need to create and manage these tags. And you'll see that the very first icon and conditional tag is a weird little thing with a tiny little plus sign and a circle. That's if you ever look it up in the help documentation, it's called a weird little thing with a... You can click on it, and what this lets you do is build additional tags. Now, without me going through and defining every single thing in this yet, what were the 2 tags that I said we're going to create? What are their environments? Mac, Windows. Which one do you want to do first? Mac. How do I do that? What's the tag name? Currently it reads new tag 1. What am I going to type in here?
Cheese.
I
couldn't resist.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sorry.
Leave it to Bob to throw cheese into what we're doing. All right. The style for this in the drop down, don't worry about these. I'm going to just pick something simple in a few moments, but you can give it all kinds of different overline, strike through, underline. So for example, you could have one, and change that to a Mac. You could have one that is deprecated and you want to use strike through so that you can cross stuff out without removing it yet. Color. This is the color of the text. Again, we'll leave that alone for a few moments. Background. This gives you the visual background, like somebody's run a highlighter over top of your content. Using the combination in any way you see fit of style, color, and background, configure something for Mac. I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to use red because it's Apple, haha. And the background for the text, I'm going to put white so that I'll get what looks like a red highlighter over white text. And then I'll click OK. And now inside my conditions dialog, I have comment followed by Mac. And I'm going to create another one. So once more, I click new. And I call this one Windows. And this one, I will just give it a color. I'm going to give it the color of, I'll go with forest green. Actually, I'll go with something a little brighter just because of the screen in here. I'll go with magenta and choose OK. So as I build this, my Mac stuff should end up with white text with a red background once I apply this. My Windows stuff is going to end up with that magenta. I'm going to triple click use the Finder. One click selects an insertion point, double click a word, triple click a paragraph. Same as in most software. Next to the Mac, I turn on the check mark. So I want this to be Mac. And it does not automatically apply because you could have multiple things that are in here. You could say, well, I'm going to have Mac and Windows. I'm also going to have administrator and user. And I'm also going to have legal and HR. And I could say this is for the Mac, for the administrator in the HR side of things. So you can combine these together, which is why it doesn't automatically do anything yet. But I've highlighted the paragraph, use the Finder. I've turned on this first checkbox. And at the top where all those icons are, including the new and the edit and the trash and so on, there's a check mark. That will apply everything that you've selected. Now, it reverses the highlight, just like when you double click a word, it puts a black background and shows you white lettering. So use the finder looks wrong, but if I click away from it, it now has a red highlighter with white lettering. Fix the Explorer content, use the Explorer to be Windows only, and turn on the check mark and click away from it. And you should see something similar to what I have here. My text for use the Explorer here in the classroom is a little faded looking because of the wall itself, but the idea should be there, and that's one of the reasons that I used a noticeable background change for the Mac as well, just so that you can see it. Everybody okay with the changes so far? This first part was template developer, but then when we went through and we selected use the finder, turned on the check mark and applied it, or use the Explorer, turned on the check mark and applied it, that's the author side. The author is told, here's the stuff, use it. Question?
So you have a template designer and an author. Do you have different books when you're using this software? Or
Right.
The writers, you know?
So I have a template designer and I have an author, and are there different looks? There could be. Remember when I clicked up in the top right on authoring here? Well, I might have one in there if I feel like it called template developer. And I can build one for template developer. So let's say the template developer had this look and feel. There are different things running down the side here. And then that individual could still come along and say, oh, I also want to use this paragraph designer, this object style catalog. I don't need the undo history. I want to dock this over onto the side. I want to take this and put it underneath it. I'm working with very limited screen resource here, so some stuff looks a little weird. I could then come along and say, take this, save the workspace. So technically, yes, you could. And technically, just like with Word, you could go in. I'm just setting the authoring here for a moment to bring it back. Bear with me. Reset the workspace. And I want to go to my so technically I could go in and save the workspace, and I could even go through, depending on who I'm working with, and decide that things like the menu choices across the top or even the toolbars are locked in. So I can give my author an incredibly restricted, or I could say, look, I'm just going to set it up so that you have an authoring environment that shows you the things that you use most often or anything in between.
That's where I was headed, that you don't want your authors messing with the templates.
Precisely. Yeah, and you can completely lock that down. It's a little easier. I mean, it's still technical to do it in Word. It's also technical to do it in Frame. In Word, it's a little easier to do that because they've given you more visual tools to control all of the menus. In FrameMaker, you have to go to some configuration files and tweak them, but it's totally doable. Somewhere Adobe has documentation on how to do it as well. Yep. All right. Inside this document, next to, so this is in the conditional tags, next to the trash can, there's a little symbol that is show hide. It's like a T with some squiggly thing in it. Again, I can't think of a good way to describe it, but when I hover over it, you can see that there's a little pop-up that appears that says show hide. It's the middle-ish icon. And when you click it, this show hide condition appears. And I can move that around on the screen by dragging the show hide conditional text. Depending on where you drag it, you may end up seeing some pop-ups appearing so that you can actually dock this and attach it on your screen. So here I've got the gray title. I'm going to try to drop it off to the side. There's a lot of stuff that you can do, and I'm not going to get into it too deep. All I want you to do is see the show hide conditional text. Right now it's showing everything. I'd like you to just turn on the show as per condition, and let's move Mac to hide by double clicking and then apply it. Yes, yes, yes. And now you see only the Windows version. And if you double click Mac and double click Windows in the show as per condition, you can swap the two. We don't have anything for comment, so it doesn't matter if you're showing or hiding. But now when you apply it, it reads use the Finder, swap Mac, swap Windows, apply. You have used the Explorer. There's also a checkbox 2/3 of the way down that says show condition indicators. And if you click that and then apply, it hides the red or it hides the magenta. So this is very close to what you would print or make into a PDF. And then you can say, here's the Mac version or here's the Windows version. And you'll see that under step 2, it still has the full text on the Mac, use a Finder, on Windows Explorer. Of course, that content's still there. We didn't do anything to conditionalize it. I just wanted a source that you could look at. Show all and show the condition indicators and apply. This is the PDF version that you might create in order to hand to a subject matter expert and say, read this. And the subject matter expert comes through and says, how come you've got this big text about everything combined and then you've got some of it in red and some of it in magenta or whatever format you've used? And my answer would be, I had your original information, I've rewritten it, I'm going to get rid of it. Mac users will see Mac, Windows users will see Windows. And now I have to create a PDF for Mac and customize, a PDF for Windows and customize. I'm going to show you how this works on the web though. Instead of having to create 2 outputs, I can create 1 output and let my user decide. And that gets to be really neat because I could do things like, here is the procedure, step by step how to do something. And I have all kinds of additional information that I've decided arbitrarily is for my novice user. If you self-identify as an advanced user, you'll see select file, select the location, choose a file type. If you self-identify as a novice user, I will also give you use the Finder if you're a novice Mac user, or I will also give you use the Explorer if you're a novice user, but that's my pick. You can decide what kind of a user you are. Or I could come along and I could say, here's a document that I've generated output for a product. And it turns out the product is available in a luxury version and a basic version. I put it on the website and I let people decide, do you want to see the luxury or the basic version? And they can turn it on and off. So with these kinds of settings, you can do almost anything. Think about different products, different platforms, different audiences that might be consuming information and giving them control. So this is the part that really is awesome when I start to show this to clients. And if I'm doing a demo, I do it up really fancy. I use some of their own documentation. It's like, here we're doing a nice simple one. But if we go back to the file, publish. So you'll remember file publish had PDF. Do not click PDF right now. So the PDF would show you both. It'll show you everything that's on screen. Do not double click responsive HTML5. If the template developers have already done their job, you can double click HTML5. They haven't, by which I mean you haven't, because I haven't and I haven't shown you how to do that yet. So single click responsive HTML5, go to your settings file and edit. Main screen reads outputs. Very bottom has use dynamic content filter in the output. Turn that on. And you get a pop-up. I have a couple of videos that I've done with Adobe that show some of these, but this is one that people always find really interesting once it's functional. The title. So what is a human-friendly thing? Well, I'm going to type in pick what you want to read. So now it's going to have across the top, pick what you want to read. And then I'm going to say things like Macintosh version or Apple version. I'm going to say Windows or Microsoft. But I might also include other groupings, and I might put things in like the administrator version or the user version. We're doing a basic one here. Under the define, there's 2 icons. The first one is the high-level group. And under this, we're going to say something along the lines of what platform do you use? And then we're going to put in the 2 conditions, and we're going to say Apple or Windows. So let's click that first icon, and we'll type in a little human-friendly message. What computer system? And I'll throw in a question mark because I'm, grammatically correct since this is STC and need to. So that's the question that I'm going to ask. The top part is pick what you want to read. What computer system? Second icon. All right, and Bob's going to walk us through how to do this. So Bob, which one do we want first, Mac or Windows?
Which one? Mac.
All right, so I will single click on Mac and choose OK. Now that gives me the word Mac, which I don't really like. Generally speaking, in Windows, if you have a chunk of text, like a file name or equivalent that you don't like the name of, you can usually click on it a second time, and it goes to an edit mode. Let's give it a shot. Apple.
I clicked on it twice.
Slow click.
There you go.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's considered a double click. Yeah, first one's usually a select, and I hate when I double click and I meant to single click and then click, and it opens a file that takes 2 minutes to open. Yeah. Then I click in the white space and it reads Apple. Second icon, and this time I'm going to get you to add one that says Microsoft. So go to this second one, Windows, and add in Microsoft. Anybody in the room do training? Deliver training before? You know how sometimes you get people, you start to show them, and then you say, now you do it, and you don't do it yourself, so that they get that's what I'm doing here. I want you to try it on your own. Comfort level is there. You're able to build one. You also have access to the video afterwards. Notice, by the way, that Apple was gone in here because you'd already selected it. So it narrows it down so that you don't end up putting in the second thing the same way. And Windows, we changed to Microsoft, right? Okay. At the very bottom of this, it allows multiple selections in a group. I'm going to turn that off on mine because I want them to pick one or the other. And there might be times that you do want multiple selections because you might be doing something like compare the features for this and that and the other thing, and you want to see a full list. I'm going to save that, and I'm then going to click Save and Close. Is anybody prompted to give it a name?
Yep.
Yeah, pick a location, give it a name. You could call it, I called mine default, but you could call yours, platform choice or whatever you want to do. And again, I'm not seeing anything in the chat window, so my hope is that for the users playing along at home, it is making sense and it's progressing well. All right, double-click responsive HTML5. Generate it. When you're done, view the output. And now, you'll see running down the side in all of the tools, a filter, little funnel. Click it once. Watch your content and play with the options.
Oh,
Nice.
nice.
At Adobe TCS, if you're tweeting stuff out. Right? As soon as I show this, everyone's like, oh, wow, nice. That's cool, right? And it's not like you have to do anything extra. Let's go in and build one more. I'm just going to have you add another step in here so that we have both the Apple, Microsoft, Mac, Windows type of thing from an author standpoint. Now that everything exists, let's do it as an author for a moment. So there's saving documents, and we have saving with a new name or to a new location. And I'm going to make that, I like function 9. I'm going to make that into a heading 1, H1. So I have my main title on saving documents, and I have a sub under that that talks about how to save with new names or new locations. And I've got my little blah, blah. I'm going to change this text. I'm going to make this one even shorter. Rename or move the file. And then underneath that, I'm going to put in my numbered 1. So I'm using my keyboard shortcut. Open a file, and I press enter. Select a location. Use the Finder. Use the Explorer. And these are becoming steps 2, 3, 4. I don't care right now. Name the file. Click Save. So as an author, it's pretty quick. You write the stuff. My numbering is set up so that the 1 automatically put in my 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I have a 3, 4. I'm going to highlight both of those and make them into indented.
Open a file.
Yeah, function 9, and then I made it into numbered 1.
Correct.
And then I take these two and I function 9 and I make them into an indented. Now Word does have shortcuts, but they're limited. Control Alt 1, 2, and 3, for example, give you heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. What's the Word shortcut to apply bullet or number or indent? I don't know. I don't know if there is one. FrameMaker has the access to all of these shortcuts all the time. And notice that my old 5 and 6 became 3 and 4. Use the Finder, Mac, apply. Use the Explorer, Windows, apply. Then I save this, and I double-click responsive HTML5. And once more, I view the output.
I lost the apply on my conditional tag.
It's the green checkbox in the top, the little toolbar thing. Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
And after I build my responsive HTML5, I double-click, I view the output, and what do you see? You only see the one, right?
Yeah.
Check your table of contents.
Oh.
It's now split the two pieces, which, by the way, you can completely control inside that visual dialog. But it's now split it into two things, and if you filter one of them to be Apple, and then you jump back and forth between these, it shows you only the Apple. So it will remember it as well. So once you've set your user preference, it stays. So if I say on the Apple, show me the administration of the XYZ product line, I will see the Apple administration of the XYZ product line. But if I needed to see both, because I do want to know what do I do, what's different on a Mac, on a Windows, there's your options. So that gives you a really quick overview of some of the publishing side of things in about an hour of creating content, applying styles, creating the condition, publishing to PDF, publishing to HTML, setting up multi-channel, multi-condition. And if I take this information again and I resize this, there's my phone version. And when I tuck this away, I've got a touch screen laptop here, so I can click the filter, I can choose Microsoft. And if I go into this thing, filter, Microsoft, apply. Use the Explorer. Oh no, I've typed it wrong. I go back, I fix my source, I publish, I'm done. Search, Finder. Saving shows up. This one shows up because on a Mac, use the Finder, and on a Windows. Oh crap, I've still got old content in there. Watch this. I go back, I delete the text, save the file, rebuild my HTML5. That filter is not just showing and hiding content. If I view the output here, use the Finder, use the Explorer. I'm going to do a search. I'm going to search for the word Finder. 2 results, correct? Okay. I'm going to filter this to just the Microsoft version. Search result, no results. Because Finder doesn't exist for the Microsoft world. It's not just visible content that it's hiding. It's also hiding the index, the table of contents, the search results, anything that is not relevant based on the output that you've conditionalized. So now you get exactly what you need. Not only exactly what you need, you also get rid of what you don't need. So that if somebody goes in and does a search for the word find, they get the right information if that word exists. They don't have a link that says, oh, here you go, and they click it, and it turns out it's about the Apple Finder. So that gives you an idea on just the FrameMaker side of things. Any questions on that one? I'm going to show you one more thing in FrameMaker and then sort of start to wrap up, but it'll be related to structure and to the DITA side. I want to show you the same type of an idea, just a different way that you can create it that goes beyond just frame. But it's 10 after 2. I suggest we take a 5-minute bio break. Yep.
Well, you saw me starting to move.
I was ready to.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, about an hour or so left on the official agenda through to 3:30. I want to show you how to do some of the things we've just done and a little more over in the DITA world. First, I want to, and I'll just do this on my machine. I just want to show you a few little things around combining together multiple files. So this was my saving documents. I'm just going to change this to printing documents, and I'll select file print. Set it up. Click print. All right, file print, you set it up, then you click print.
That's the three profit.
Yeah. All right, so that one there is going to be a save as, and I'm going to call this print or printing so that it's consistent, right? File naming convention, etc. I'm going to put one in called open. Click a file, click open. All right, so now I have 3 documents. They could be multiple pages, they could be really complex, etc. But they now exist. I've closed off my files. So FrameMaker lets you create individual documents. It also lets you create something called a book document. So if I choose file new book, if anybody remembers the master document in Word, this is the same thing except that it works. That's the core difference between the two. So what you would do is you plan your content, you figure out what it is that you're creating, let's say a user manual, you organize all of the topics. Once you're ready, you start creating your chapters, you organize it, you write your chapters, and at some point you would come along and you take a book, and inside the book, you would insert files. And let me do a save as on this. I'm just going to put it into the same location we've had our other stuff so far, into the STC folder. I'll call this one work with files. All right, so I'm going to insert some files into this, specifically the open, the print, the save, and I add them. And now I have my document. So the idea is that you create your content. The drawback to this method, generally speaking, if you create a document, you're going to create a 1-page, 2-page, 5-page, 20-page. You end up creating your chapters, and at the end you might have 10 chapters. Each of the 10 chapters in turn contains let's say 10 topics to make the math easy, 10 heading 1s, and each heading 1 underneath it has 10 heading 2s. So you've got 1,000 things in 10 files. The problem becomes management of that content. If you have 10 files, you can only have 10 people working with them at any given time because a file is opened and it's locked for other users. If I could take the 1,000 unique things that I have and I could put them together in such a way that they are small, discrete pieces like what we've created so far, and then I can assemble them at any time into as much or as little of a combination as I want, I could come along and I could write about Cleveland. And when I'm ready, I could grab Cleveland as a component and plug it in with all of the other cities, not necessarily states, cities that have football teams, NFL teams. And then I could say I'm going to do my NFL publication. I could also come along and I could say, well, I'll take Cleveland and I'm going to take every other city that has a baseball team, major league ball team. And that includes a Canadian city, Toronto. Toronto, I put into one that has every single hockey team. So now I have 3 different sports publications. I have a baseball publication, a hockey publication, a football. And there's some cities like Dallas or New York that overlap. And there's other cities that are in 2 of the publications or just 1 of the publications. If somebody then goes back and edits the Toronto document, all 3 places that reference it would automatically have the updated information when I publish. If, on the other hand, I had written about Toronto inside a chapter on football, a chapter on baseball, a chapter on hockey, and then I go back and I start publishing, I realize, well, Toronto has a football team, but depending on who you talk to, it's the TFC, or TFS, the Toronto football team, soccer football. We also have a football North American idea, CFL, Canadian Football League. So if I put the Toronto book into one of the publications, I've got to remember to show and to hide and to turn on and to include and to exclude information. If on the other hand, I can write very focused content, knock it down to this type of an idea, I can plug it in wherever I need to. As far as the companies that you're working at, if you have products, if you have services, and you can write specific information about this one software tool and its function, such as how to save, you might write it in a way that is applicable to the Mac and to the Windows machine, but you do it generic enough that the save could be how to save a Word document, could be how to save in a video game, it could be how to save in a FrameMaker document, save an Excel spreadsheet, save an Illustrator graphic. All of those things still apply. And then you just plug in that module wherever you need it. So DITA looks at content rather than at a chapter. And here I have 3 chapters, one on save, one on print, one on open. And maybe I would have a single chapter more realistically on file management that contains these as heading 1, heading 1, heading 1 inside it. But in the DITA world, you can write your individual topics and then you compile them together. Instead of in a book, you compile them into a map, which has a similar structure. It has main and subtopics. So a lot of the functionality is similar. What we've done so far has been just FrameMaker specific. So that conditional publishing, for example, just Frame. If we want to recreate that in any software tool that is DITA aware, we could do so, including FrameMaker. So when we're done, we could work with half a dozen different tools. We could take the content, put it into a content management system. We could publish it through a different system. We could run a different review cycle. We could work with the content in any tool, the same way that you can take an HTML file, and if you wanted to, you can open it up in Internet Explorer, you can open it up in Chrome, you can open it in Firefox, you can open it in Notepad. They're all going to open up the file. They'll do different things when they open it. Notepad will display it. Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer will display it with format instead of the code. And if you open it up in an editing tool, then what you can do is develop your web page. And you might have links to the code and they show up in different ways. So I want to show you a little bit of that because we've done a little bit in the FrameMaker. But just before we do, let me exit by doing this one thing. I'm going to open up these 3 files, the save, the print, the open. And I'm just doing this on my machine so that you get an idea. Have you ever tried standardizing Word documents? You have 3 different Word documents and somebody says change the look and feel. Even if they're all the same, how do you go through and you change 3 Word documents to now have a new look and feel?
Fix one and then you import the styles.
Good. All right. And do you trust that? You fix one, you import the stuff. There's a, pardon?
Not if you have Outlook open.
Not if you have Outlook open, right. So what I'm going to do here is the same type of an idea. I'm going to go in here, cascade these windows out, split them apart a little bit so that I have each of them showing a little bit of an overlap. Oops. All right, so there's save, print, open. I'm going to work with the printing documents. Hopefully you can see that okay. You can sort of see part of the open in the background. You can see part of the save in the background, but here we are in printing documents. Very basic example that I want to jump in and show. I'm just going to take printing documents, and let's say you try this in Word. You're taking your document and somebody says, oh, number them so that they're all chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. So you just set up your numbering in Word, you import it, everything works perfectly, right? Not so much? Okay.
No.
All right, what if we do something simple, like let's make it blue, and then you import it into all the Word documents, the content's blue? I'm going to do both. I'm going to go in, I'm going to take the title, and I'm going to change the color of the content so that it is blue, and update it, and you'll see printing documents is blue. Saving is not, open is not. I'm also going to go to the numbering, and I'm going to say, look, I want this to read chapter, and then in here, I'm going to use these building blocks. And if you wanted to try this, you could take FrameMaker, slow it down, watch the video, try this, because these documents are very basic ones that I've created. Chapnum, colon space, and update the style. So now it reads chapter 1. So I want the others to pick this up as well. And I'm going to move this around just a little bit so that you can see it a little more clearly here. I overlap them. Move that one down a touch. All right, there we go. So I have printing documents. That one's in good shape. I've got that at the bottom of the screen. The other 2, not yet there. So what I do is I select everything inside the book document. and I choose under File to import the formats. And FrameMaker gives you a lot of control over the formats. I can choose which of the 3 documents is the one I want to import from, the print. I can choose exactly what to import. So I'm going to import only the paragraph format. That way, all I'm doing is I'm pulling in the look and feel of title, body, numbered 1, etc. I'm not necessarily pulling in the look and feel of tables. Maybe my tables are different and I want to keep them different. Maybe I've updated part of a template and part of a different template. I'm trying to do one standard across the company. So I only want to bring part of this thing and part of that thing in order to standardize it. Keep a good eye on the open and the saving when I click import. It's telling me there's no undo on this. Chapter 1 open, Chapter 1 save, Chapter 1 printing. So I kind of sort of got it right. I got the color in there. At which point the astute reader will say, yeah, but you screwed up the numbering. No, I did not. I did not screw up the numbering. The numbering is doing exactly what it's told to do. At present, it is told that individual files have numbering of the first. So they read 1. But if I take the book and I do a little bit of setup on it, I can configure the numbering for these documents within here. And instead of telling them that they are chapter 1, I'm going to say continue the chapter numbering. It's going to turn off some of these, do not show it again. And now, because chapter 1 saving documents is the first in the book and chapter 2 printing is the second and chapter 3 open is the third, they're numbered correctly. And if I come along and I rearrange these, I'm going to try to spread them out so that it's a little easier to see all of these at the same time, even if it means sizing things in a little bit of a goofy way. So what if I move open to the beginning? Well, I move open to the beginning and I tell the book to update. Chapter 1 is open, Chapter 2 is saving, Chapter 3 is printing. Saving, I'm going to put that last. You open it, you print it, and then you save it. So that goes last. I update the book. Numbering is correct. Every single time, always. As you build up your templates, as you make them more consistent, FrameMaker has more power. It costs more. It has a steeper learning curve. You know what else costs more and has a bigger learning curve? A Ferrari. Or a McLaren. And even the Toyota that you have that you drive on the street, Toyota has a machine that is used on the racetrack, and they cost more, and they are more difficult to master, but they have far more power, they have far more capability. It's just not the right thing for everyone. And FrameMaker is the same type of a thing. It's not for everyone. If what you're doing is creating memos, if what you're doing is creating short 1 or 2 page documents or a 4-page flyer that needs to be printed on 11 by 17 and folded in half, yeah, you can do it with Frame. But if that's all you're doing, you're buying yourself a performance race car when really all you need is a Toyota Corolla in order to get to and from A and B. In this environment, though, if you start doing large documentation, if you need a lot of additional capability, FrameMaker delivers what others won't. And it includes support for DITA. So I wanted you to see some of the things that can be done. Again, we have a short amount of time and Adobe has all kinds of videos, but I wanted to show this and to just give you the idea that you can do this stuff. It's not incredibly difficult to go out and test and experiment with these.
I can say one time I was using FrameMaker and when I started a new job, Word, we're doing large,
Yeah.
100-something, couple 100-page page. Oh, and then finally we got FrameMaker.
Yeah.
It was one time.
It is difficult to go back. Anybody drive stick shift? How much do you enjoy going back to automatic afterwards?
You don't.
You don't.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went through a 5-speed, I got a hybrid, so it's
Yep.
CVT. And I
it's
miss it.
right.
Yeah.
We when Noah was learning how to drive, we went out and we got a Nissan Versa because it's a gutless little car. It doesn't have a ton of power. It's stick shift. And I figured it is almost impossible to drive a car and use stick shift when you have to shift all the time because you're doing city driving and use your cell phone.
Or drink coffee.
Or drink coffee. So we got him that car. And well, we got me that car. And he got to learn how to drive on it. And for quite a while, he would ask about taking out the automatic. And I said, all right, but you've got to learn the stick shift first. So we taught him stick shift. He got going with it, hated it. He's a BMW fan. Wants this like 1980s BMW is sort of his dream car. We're driving along a few years after he had his license. He goes, stop the car. What? He says, stop. So I stopped the car. He says, look over there. I said, what? He says, it's a BMW E Series. It's for sale. He says, hang on. He gets out of the car. He walks over. He's all happy. He walks around. He's looking at the car, looks in the driver's side, comes walking back. His head's down. He's like, oh. He gets in the car. I said, what was it? What? He says, oh, automatic. Deal breaker, not getting it.
Oh, really?
Once you get used to that kind of control, it becomes a little addictive.
Yeah.
And if you're driving something that's a performance style car, you want to be able to control every aspect of it. It's the same thing with the software. You want to be able to control every aspect of it. And it's difficult sometimes to get that without the training. So what I'd like to do is have you go in, and I'm just going to show you a few things in regards to DITA. And yesterday when we were at Rockwell, we talked about this. I'm going to have you create a task because it's more complex than a topic, a concept, or a reference when we get into the core of the body. But the initial part of it is very similar to all of them. So this will give you a chance to see what happens, but it also gives you a bit of a guided approach to writing step 1, step 2, step 3 type of information. So the task opens up. Now, depending on your preference, how many people here have done some work at some point in time with code? Just quick show of hand. All right, you might like this. Choose view, element boundaries as tags. Oh, thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Some people really like this. The warning on it, if you show the tags, they print.
Awful.
Yeah, which is kind of weird, but from a learning standpoint, if you wanted to show someone or you wanted to work, this is beneficial to have it. So what we've done with some clients is set up little printing scripts so that when they go to print, it remembers your setting, turns it off, prints it, and then turns it back on. Because you can see it with the full tags. You can also go in under view and you can choose element boundaries, not as tags, just element boundaries. And then you just see some square bracket markup. But if you look in the bottom left of the screen, it reads e-task title. And if you look at the very top of the ruler, task title, so it tells you where your insertion point is at any given point in time. So if you click down where it reads enter only a command here, it tells you you are within the command in the step, singular, in the steps, plural, in the task body, in the task. To get you started, choose view element boundaries as tags. Let's start with that. I have a set of videos. It's for Frame 2017. I don't have it for 2019 yet, but it walks you through, I think, 6 chapters and exercises on how to work with structure. Part of it is setting up the interface to do all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to do all of that right now. I just want you to get comfortable with a couple of things associated with content first. So at the top, it reads enter title here. Let's click once. Where it reads enter title here, you can click and type in, save a file. Enter a short description. Now, the short description in general in the DITA world should be additional information that adds value to the title but does not repeat it. If you consider where we are, we're in a meeting room right now. Tricia, you'll probably appreciate this one a little bit more than the others because I know some of your background, so here we go. If I say inside the room, we have the idea of a meeting space, and I want to talk about what it means when I say table or chair. Everybody has in their mind what I mean by table or chair, right? Right? The chair is the person who runs the meeting, and table is to bring forward or set aside motions, correct? I mean, that's what we did in board meetings, right? The chair ran. That's not what you were thinking.
No.
So if the title reads table and chair, or chair and table, the short description could say furniture for your kitchen, and that means one thing, or roles and responsibilities in a business meeting, and it means something else. So to have that lead-in paragraph, and this is something I talked about in minimalism side of things as well, the short description should add value to the title without repeating it, but don't just put in to save a file, colon. I'm already in a topic called save a file. I know I'm going to save a file. Don't add extra words just because. If it turns out that you want the phrase to title of the task with a colon, program it. Then you can get that goofy little phrase that says to save a file, colon. But it doesn't make sense to have your writers write it twice, your translators translate it twice, your reviewers review it twice, and ultimately, from experience, if you go to almost anyone and you start showing them a bunch of this stuff, try this. If you have people who say, no, you've always got to have a lead-in, just give them some information and say, all right, can you read through this? And I just need you to quickly do this, this, this. And have them start doing it. And then when you have things like save a file, instead of putting in to save a file, put in something different. See if they even notice. Don't do it on the first or the second or the third. But after a while, they will start to skip words. I set up my wife's company. They were all tech writers on the team. I set up her company 12 or 13 years ago. They were one of the first companies to use DITA with FrameMaker. We actually built the templates because FrameMaker did not include that. So we built a template for them, set everything up. I gave them about 4 or 5 pages of setup instructions. Here's exactly what you need to do. Step-by-step instructions. I used their template. In their template, they said if a step is only one, it's a bullet. I said, no. If a step is only one, it's a number. And they said, no, it's a bullet. I said, a bullet's not a step. They said, well, it's a single step. So we argued this. Client wins. I gave them instructions in their own template. About 2/3 of the writers did not get the system to work. Another 1/3 did. One of those being my wife. She got it to work. And once it was working on some of the machines, the other people came back and said, oh, there's something wrong with the instructions. Like, no, there isn't. The instructions are awesome. I know. I wrote them. It's the user. They said, no, we did exactly what we're instructed. I said, all right. So I went over. I said, let me see what you're doing. And sure enough, they started going through. And after a while, I watched them, and they scanned the page, and they looked for the next number, and they skipped a bullet. Their own writers, using their own style guides, skipped over that information. So when it comes to putting together content, don't give readers a reason to skip things. They skip bullets whenever they saw them, and when they saw a single bullet, they skipped it thinking it's just informational. And they expected 1, 2, 3 to be procedural. Don't write a short description. Don't add a paragraph of content if it doesn't actually add value. Otherwise, you're paying to write it, to edit, to translate, to manage it, only to have people ignore it. And you start conditioning your readers to not pay attention to that. So in here, I'm going to put in a not goofy, but I'm going to put in a little short description. It doesn't necessarily add value in the way that it properly should, but it's just for demonstration purposes. Store stuff so you can use it later. Right, we're saving the file. We're not saving it in a come to God type of a moment. You are saved. We are not saving it in a financial investment. If you save this file, it will grow by 10% in file size every year. What we're doing is we're writing about saving it, storing it so that you can later on retrieve it. Author, you can click where it reads author name and you can type in your own name.
You get a byline?
You get a byline. These are just defaults inside the FrameMaker setup. If you don't want this initial structure, you could change it. DITA makes the prologue and the author optional, so you could delete the prologue, no impact. The short desk is optional. You could delete it. The title is required. You cannot create a topic without having a title for it. How do you know what's required and what's not? So I'll ask you a different question for a moment. At your company, how do you know what days are what dress code requirements? Or how do you know where the restrooms are or where the washrooms are? Pardon? Signs. Yeah, you have documentation. You read that documentation. You get used to it. There's documentation that comes with DITA that documents what is required, what is optional, and part of it is experience. As you start using it, yeah.
They don't flag it.
They don't flag it here, but there is. So we're talking about flagging errors. Take a look under the structure menu and open the structure view. I'll show you something very specific that's kind of neat. The structure view is a hierarchy of everything that's in your document. And inside it, you'll see that there is currently a task, a title, a short desk, a prologue. In the middle of the element that says prologue, in the middle of the bubble on that black text prologue, click one time. That selects the object and then delete it. You see anything funky in your structure view that makes you think maybe it's broken? Try this. Click one time on title. Press delete. See anything funky that makes it look like it might be broken? Undo, Control Z. Take the middle of the word title, drag it into the step command area and drop it. Now you have two things. You're missing something and an invalid structure. Undo. Some people will say FrameMaker's horrible software because it takes this very formal structure and it lets you mess it up. Other people will say FrameMaker's an awesome software tool. It has the rules, but it allows me to work around them temporarily. And both are correct. It's a horrible tool because it allows you to do all kinds of stuff, which is what makes it an awesome tool. And I say that because there might be a time where something I need for a title has been written elsewhere, and initially in another location, it was just a paragraph. Well, I cannot take the P element and put it where the title is. It doesn't allow me. Other software might complain and say, that's wrong, we're not going to let you do it. So then I have to try to get just the text and paste it in. FrameMaker lets me put it in here, and I end up with a P element where the title is, and then I can change it from one element to another valid element. I don't know which one is right, just like I can't tell you the best way to get from Cleveland to Toronto. Because the best way to get from Cleveland to Toronto is dependent on multiple things. For those of you who are independently wealthy and have your own plane, take that. For those of you that are looking for a very affordable way and you don't care about the time, there are buses. They will go to Buffalo. You can get a Buffalo to Toronto bus. You just have to wait for the other 30 people on the bus at passport time to work their way through. If you happen to have somebody on the bus that has a name like Jim Smith, you might be waiting a little while as you go between one country to the other because Jim Smith is wanted in the US, Jim Smith is wanted in Canada. I don't know how many Jim Smiths there are. My wife worked with a Jim Smith. Every time we got to the border, we'd drive to Buffalo. I'd hand over the passports. The passport, US agent. Bernard, right here. Great. Vivian, over here. James Smith. Jim leans forward. He goes, where do you want us to pull over? Every time. So that might not be the best way to get from A to B, but it is one way to get there, and it depends on what you need to do. And the same thing here. What's the best way to go in and learn DITA and structure? And depends. What's the best way to create your content? Is it worth having prologue with the author and other metadata? Maybe. Big part of that would be analysis of what your needs are and then seeing how those needs can be met by what's here. But I'll get you the basics of doing some work in here. You can see that the step has a CMD, the command. You could click in the document between the CMDs, or you can click just to the right of the structural element in the structure view for CMD. Either way, you end up beside the CMD or inside it, and we can type in, select, and press spacebar. Now this one, don't type file, save as. What should a menu option like file or save as, what should it look like when it's formatted? Everybody's got style guides, right? What do they look like? Should it be bold? Should it be italic? Should it be larger? Should it be a different font? Should it have color? What about a table title? How do you number table titles? Should they be table 1, table 2, table 3? Or should they be table A, table B, table C? Well, it doesn't matter. It should be formatted correctly. So here, instead of us putting in the words, what we're going to do is insert, and there's a couple of different ways you can do this. I'm going to show you Control-1 as a keyboard shortcut. Go ahead and press Control-1. There is an entire catalog of elements, but Control-1 gives you a list here. And just start typing the word menu. And there is a menu cascade, and press Enter. And then just type the word file.
Where's menu?
Let me delete my menu cascade and I'll redo it once. So I've typed in select, I pressed space bar.
Yes, I got all kind of no value, ID, unwrap.
I got that the first time. I had to go back and do it again.
So make sure you're after the word select. There you go, Control-1. and start typing menu cascade. Oh, oh, I see what's happened. Your steps no longer has a step or a command. No, undo it. Make sure you click beside the CMD rather than on it. So just to the right of it. There you go. And then type select single space. Ah, it is very much code. And if you're in an incorrect place in code, it doesn't allow you to do certain things.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, because the step had been removed, so it only had the step. So the command was removed, it only had the step.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So we have select and then control 1, and you should be able to see menu cascade now.
Got it. Yes.
Press enter, and then you can click either within the middle of this UI control in your document window or beside the UI control, and then just type file and press enter and put in another file, and then I got to click under. Sorry, my screen resolution is driving me nuts here. So I have a menu cascade. It contains UI control, and under it, I'm putting in a second UI control. And then watch what happens in your document when you have UI control, and a menu cascade. It puts in a symbol automatically.
Huh?
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm not.
how do you get the second UI?
All right, so you have a menu cascade with one UI control.
Uh-huh.
Click just beneath it.
Uh-huh.
You do it without having that thing. 'Cause I don't.
If you don't have it open, what you can
I'm
do
right there. Yeah,
is click after the close of the UI control,
yeah.
but before the close of the menu cascade. All right. And then at that location, we put in a second UI control. And we type in
I guess where
Save
I'm
as.
how did you put in the second UI control?
control 1,
Oh,
keyboard shortcut.
thank you.
Yep.
Jeez.
And again, I'm going with a more complex structure instead of a simple one because I want to show you some of the things you can do when you get down into the step. This is more like a style guide to direct you. See the bold content? Your view menu, turn off element boundaries or element boundaries, whatever it is that's showing. Mine is the element boundaries as tags. You can see that the word file and the save as are automatically formatted. The symbol between them is automatically inserted. We didn't type that. Now, if I took the template that was used to make this look the way it does, and I redefined the template, and I said this symbol should actually be a graphical arrow, or it should be a comma, or it should be a pipe. And these, instead of bold, should be italic and blue. Then I redefine the rule, and I take 100,000 documents, and I reopen them using the new template. They all have italicized blue text with an arrow between it. Yeah, there is no template. As a matter of fact, behind the scenes, if I go in for a second, there's a XML code view here. I'm just going to switch to it on my machine for a second to try to show you this. That's what we have. I'm going to zoom in on this part. Ignore what's up here. That's FrameMaker garbage. As far as we're concerned, the important stuff is down underneath where the task ID is. I'm just going to zoom in for a second. What I have is the body, the steps, a single step with a command that says select. The menu cascade says file, save as, it ends, it ends, it ends, it ends. It's code. Yes. But it's a specific implementation of it. The same way that really XHTML is just XML. Shakespeare is just a set of 26 characters, uppercase, lowercase, and some numbers and punctuation. So is a math textbook. They both use the combination of words and numbers in different ways. To be or not to be is different than to be, do this, to C, do that, to D, do the last thing. 3 and 4, do something, do something. To be as a verbal piece could mean one or the other. Here, the XML happens to have a couple of things that look a little bit outside of the XML or HTML space. but this also supports OL and UL for ordered lists and unordered lists. The thing is that in HTML world, ordered list and unordered list, you just put list items into it. It's very difficult to formalize. Here's what we want you to do if you're writing a complex procedure. So I've got a tiny little procedure here. Click this minus sign by the command to collapse it. If you don't have the structure view showing, structure and structure view. And the reason I would like you to show it is it's a little easier early on to see a few extra things. So we collapse the CMD. And now you can see that the step has the command. I'm going to ask you to also open one more piece here. I just need to find where it is on the menu because things have changed around with the last release and I never quite remember where everything was.
How come they do that?
In this case, Adobe's consolidated a lot of stuff that used to exist. They have an insert menu. And under the insert, you can insert almost everything. They used to have a menu called Special, which was the miscellaneous. It's where they threw everything else. Yeah, so that you want an anchored frame, well, you insert anchored frame. You want a cross-reference, you insert an anchored a cross-reference. You want a footnote, you insert footnote. So they've consolidated the menu options. Overall, it's better, but it takes me a little bit of getting used to. If you go in under View, Pods, Element Catalog, it's 3/4, 7/8, whatever you want to pick, down to the bottom, the Element Catalog. Do you remember when I showed you the paragraph catalog? So you can have a pop-up of the catalog with all. These are all the available elements. The only thing is that now I've got my elements in my structure view, and I've got to go back and forth between the two, and it's a headache. So I want to show you one more piece that is a one-time, and it's annoying to see it early on because we're going to do a bunch of little customizations here. But instead of the authoring interface, let's go to blank. So the workspace is blank. That gets rid of everything. Because we're only going to use two things for the next while. One is the structure view, one is the element catalog. Technically, you could go in here and use the XML structured workspace. We're not going to. Instead, under under structure, structure view. There it is. View, pods, element catalog. Crap, it's sitting on top of the other one, which is okay. Because if you take, and you may want to watch this one for a second, the middle of the word elements here, I click and drag it away from here, and it floats. And this is the tricky one. When I come back, watch where I am. I have not yet let go. See that? It fades away and a bar pops out when I move in between. If I move too far, not enough. But if I hit the right spot, this thing pops out and I can drop it. And then I can resize this. So what I now have is my document, my list of all the stuff, and my structure. So again, I open my structure view, I open my elements, and I get something like this. I drag away the elements, then I put it right here with the pop out. I make it thinner. There we go. Make it a little skinnier. And then the last thing I'm going to do is here, save the workspace. Now I have my own setup that I can go back to later on whenever I want to. I usually have a workspace. I call it something like, I call mine something like DITA author often. But I can also call it structured author or something along those lines. I save the workspace. I'm going to call this one structure author. And now I can revert to this if I ever want to. So now I could have a template development environment for look and feel. I could have one that lets me work unstructured, but for some files. And I can store my own if I want to with exactly the look and feel that I want, and I can return to it. It's playing nice?
No, it just decided to throw me out of 2019.
Oh, okay.
So, go ahead.
All right. Oh, you must have used the go ahead and kick me out feature.
It was right under task.
All right. Keep an eye on my element catalog. You can see what's available in here. When I click title, it changes. If I click between title and short desk, it changes. And if I click under the CMD, it again changes. my step can have a command. As a matter of fact, the step must have a command. The rules are, if you're going to tell somebody to do something, you have to have a command that tells them how to do it. Otherwise, there's no point in putting in a step. In which case, there's no point in putting in steps. And it's possible that you have a task and it just has a prerequisite and a post-requisite, and you don't have any steps in there because maybe you haven't figured out what those steps are yet. If you have a command and you click under it, though, you can put in some choices. For example, you might tell somebody, go to Toronto. Choices: take the bus, take your private plane, drive, ride your bicycle, go over to the lake, hop into a boat, work your way across, get a good run at the falls, hitchhike.
Good run at the falls.
Well, you want to clear the rocks at the bottom when your boat lands. Whatever it might be, you have choices. You can do it in a table as well. You can put in information that helps the user understand or perform the command. You can have item groups, step results, step troubleshooting, sub-steps, etc. There's a bunch of stuff with a check mark, and if you don't know what one of them means, read the documentation. And as you start working with it, it becomes easier. For the Rockwell group, when I was there yesterday, how many times did I say, what paragraph tag do you use for this or for that? I was able to say, which ones are your headings, which ones are your numbers. I just didn't want to look through the whole list and you said it's this one or it's that or it's the other, which is great because that just gives me a quick way to understand. But the idea was which ones are numbering. Same type of idea. Most of these are pretty straightforward. Step example, XMP, it's probably an example of what you told someone to do in the step. So the step and the steps and the command, these are all elements that are available to you. And depending on where you click, that list changes. Here, I can add another step. Here, I can add a result or a post-requisite or an example. And here, I can add another subordinate task. So I could start with a task, and then I could have a couple of subs. So one of my tasks could be a main task, and then I might have two subordinate things under it. How to print. Hey, you know what? If I'm talking about how to print, maybe I also want a task underneath it on how to change toner cartridge, or how to change the page size, or how to select a specific printer. And each of these individual pieces could later on be combined together in a map, which is like a book. So you create a bunch of small pieces of information. And when you're done, you take all of those components and combine them together. So does the idea make sense, even if you're not sure exactly where to click? So let's look at, instead of us doing the work, choose File Open. The path that I'm going to give you is a horrible one to just try to remember. FrameMaker is installed somewhere and it contains sample documents. If you go, my guess is to the C drive, and program files, and let's check if there's an Adobe, and within that, an Adobe Frame 2019 folder. Is there? C drive, so Windows program files, Adobe, and Adobe FrameMaker 2019. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. In the 20 minutes or so that we have left, I just want you to see where some of the samples are so that you can play with ideas. A bunch of them are in a folder called samples. Kind of convenient, that. Not all of them, but several. And if you open that samples folder, it has an overview folder. For those from Rockwell, you may see some of this being familiar. Within it, you have a folder called context. Just pop that, or a file, context, just open it up. Let's double check. It should be, that's the path. Windows program files, Adobe Frame samples overview.
Yeah, it's something here. That's all right.
Okay. Do the rest of you have that? Okay. This is a conditional document. It's just got more content. We did a paragraph for Windows. We did one for Mac. But remember, we went in and we worked with the insert and conditional text. So conditional tags, give it a shot. choose insert conditional tags. Here it is. Remember this little icon, roughly halfway to show hide? Well, show the sedan version only. Show as per condition, sedan, apply. If you don't want to see the red, turn off the condition indicators. Double click sedan, double click pickup, swap them and apply, and you'll see the pickup version. That's one of the sample documents that comes with the product. It generally makes it a little easier to go in and test things. Let's close that file. Context, don't save it. File open. And if we go back up to the FrameMaker 2019 folder, so I mentioned the sample folder. Bear with me just a second. I want to make sure. Okay, good. I wanted to make sure I've got the right path here. This one's more involved, but you can see the Adobe FrameMaker 2019. There's a structure folder. That's where all things structured, DITA, XML, etc. live. And within it, there's an XML folder. And that has a travel DITA. Before I open this up for the geeks, I'm going to right mouse click this and edit with Notepad++ on my machine to show you something. This document is the map. It says up at the beginning, it's an XML. The doc type is a map. It has a title, Personal Spaceship Operations Manual, and it has several local topics that are DITA format, and they're found in the cover folder or in the legal folder or in the contacts. That's DITA. That's not what we're going to work with for the people who aren't geeks. For the people who aren't geeks, we're going to work with this DITA map, which it's not code at all. No, it's just DITA map. And when you double click to open it, FrameMaker converts it and it says, here you go, here's your document. It's so friendly. I open up the user guide master DITA map. Now this has within it contacts XML. So you can just double click contacts XML. That opens up your contacts file. It's an XML file. It gets parsed by FrameMaker. It gets converted into a FrameMaker document. The first time you open it, it may take a little while. What it's doing is it's actually loading a XML processor in the background. So the first time it's a little bit of a headache. The second time it's very quick. On my machine, I've also got a bunch of extra stuff that mine's been running, and I thought I disabled everything, but I may not have. Has yours opened successfully? Yeah. I use this machine for production stuff. So right now it's probably switching from Saxon to another processor. But when it's open, you'll see a table in it. You'll see text information. It looks like just any other file. But if in your structure view, if in your window here, you've got conditional tags, click your structure view. It has a title, it has a short description. It has a body that contains a table, which has a title and a bunch of stuff, including entries and rows. It looks like a normal document, but technically, it's a whole chunk of information that's code. If you open the legal XML file, you can see mine's now opening like that. It's got a short description, but it's got a bunch of little phrases in it, these PH elements. Put the little triangle beside a PH. This one is for the admin audience, and this one here is for my end user audience. And this one here is for my product A, and this one is for product B. So my legal document actually has information for two different audiences for two different products. Remember the conditions we did earlier? This is how DITA does it. It uses an element, whatever it might be, here it's a pH, and then it uses an attribute like audience with a specific value. And when you publish, you can say include admin product B. And then you only get the administrator version of the B product. Or you could say show me the end user version of product A, and you only get that one. So it's the same type of a function done in a different way. The big difference, FrameMaker's conditions are FrameMaker's. These are DITA. They apply. If you're using AEM, the Adobe Experience Manager, as an XML content management system, it'll recognize all of this stuff, and technically it can display it differently. It can publish multiple outputs based on this. It can automate a lot of what you might do manually. So there's some cool functionality on the higher end when you start getting into this, but it is very much like the difference between putting together a mass production vehicle like a Toyota Corolla or putting together a one-off Toyota high-performance race car for Formula One. In each of those environments, there's a lot of similarities. You got four wheels, you have a steering wheel. However, the steering wheel in the Formula One car costs more than a Toyota Corolla. $40,000. The steering wheel, the seat inside that vehicle is contoured specifically to the driver. And what you end up with is an incredibly high performance machine that everybody looks at Formula One racing largely from the, wow, what a bunch of rich people just racing around doing nothing productive. Formula One racing is where they were able to do things like test different functionality in vehicles that they then were able to bring to mass production. Right. It's where they can go in and see what is the actual impact if we do exactly this one fine tuning in the real world in the hands of the best drivers. And by and large, it's where the engineering development happens that then gets passed down to the vehicles in bulk. It's a place where they can experiment and test. And you wouldn't think that you want to experiment and test on something that's millions of dollars and then likely to get into an accident. In the FrameMaker side, in order to get to the DITA model, you are going to have a bunch of places where, and a couple of companies have mentioned, and a couple of teams and companies have mentioned they've tried to implement it unsuccessfully. Don't implement DITA. You don't need to. Nothing says it has to be there, but if you do work on it, instead of just jumping in and creating content, what you could do is tell your writers, work more like this. We're going to have a title, we have a short description, and then we're going to have the command, which tells you to do something, and we're going to have some information about that, and we're going to have a step example, and maybe your step example is formatted so that it automatically reads, for example. And you do this using just paragraph formats, and you get people into a comfortable pattern. When it comes to things like this, file save as, you say we have a character format that you put on the word file, and you put it on save as. And what that's going to do is make it bold, but we don't call it bold, we call it menu option. Menu option. And you get your users comfortable with the idea. The same way that, as a general rule, you can't just come along and tell somebody who's never used Microsoft Word before, hey, sit down, here's our style guide, go. But what you can do is sit down with somebody who's never used Word before and say, look, here's the software, you're going to write a couple things, and all you're going to do is you're going to assign title, or you're going to type, or you're going to use heading 1. Just enough to get you comfortable with it. Then you introduce heading 2. Then you introduce the idea of, here's a bullet list. Don't worry about numbered lists. We're not going to do numbering in Word. We don't want to scare you away. Then after 5-6 years of using Word and finally getting comfortable with it, you say, all right, now we're going to try numbering because, you don't have a choice anymore. You introduce it in stages. And the same thing can be done here. If you ignore the structure and you look here, that's a paragraph, a paragraph, a paragraph, a paragraph, a paragraph. This one has some character level formatting. You can do that in unstructured frame. You can do that in Word. You can do it anywhere. Over time, you start looking at this. Now, why would you ever want to do that? Well, in part, because later on, if I come over to the output, and I'm going to wrap up with this. The travel DITA folder has this output location, and within it, it has all of this. Product A for the admin and the end user, product B for the admin and the end user. So if I'm going with my product A for the end user, I have a PDF document. This is all created from one set of DITA materials, and it's just publish, publish, publish. So this one's a PDF. I'm going to switch over. That is my product A end user. I'm going to go to my product B end user and open the same thing. Okay, here's legal. And let's get down to the legal. Here's legal. All right. Great work now. Okay. Which?
We're just reading it.
Oh.
The third paragraph.
I got to write it. I got to create these sample materials for Adobe, and it was just fun. Yeah,
Don't try to find any.
even a personal one, ever. Seriously, you likely aren't qualified. Read the first paragraph. Contents for demo purpose only. Any user must read the manual before operating. Your luxuriously appointed way to travel to the stars awaits you. Your well-appointed spaceship awaits you. That's the same source content. Remember I showed you the phrases in the legal? Materials are based on, don't try to, we provide it as is. The rest of that stuff is the same information. It's very little information, but it changes up here. If we drill down a little further inside here, we get to, let's see, I think this seat configuration or change, okay, this seat configuration says launch it, seat configuration, etc. It's followed by change the seat temperature display. If I go to this one, a lot of the exact same information. Seat temperature, change the seat temperature display. I think I have it on this one, personal, oh, it's for lighting, sorry. Adjust the lighting levels. In some cases, the pilot or other administrator may override your personal lighting preferences, right? That's adjust the lighting levels. If I go into here, I think this is B and A. In some cases, the pilot or other administrator of the system. So pilot or administrator, because these are the user level versions. And I closed my folder, so I'm going to drill back down. If instead I go into my program files, Adobe, FrameMaker2019, structure, XML sample for travel data. And I'm going to go to the administrator version instead. The administrator version at the beginning, the legal information, still the same. Except it says administrators and operators must read the manual before operating. Down here, when it comes to lights, the administrator of the system has the ability to override any personal preferences. In here, in some cases, the pilot or other administrator may override your preference. This is for the user. The other one's for the administrator. And then it goes further. I did it again. I closed that folder. I'm going to avoid this problem. Copy. The administrator version. Let's look at the responsive HTML5 version of this. And somewhere in here, I believe, is the index. There's my index. Crew area. I jump into that. Here's my crew area. I've got my navigation system running down this side. There's my table of contents. Here's my contacts. There's my table 1. I drill down to the spaceship requirements. I go in, I do a search for lights. Adjust the lighting levels. I drill down into this, the administrator of the system. If I go to the exact same page in the administrator manual, it says as the pilot, you can control this. So I've created HTML output, PDF output. I've created an administrator A, administrator B, end user A, end user B. How many different combinations did I create? Way more than I wanted to, but hey, Adobe was in charge. I've got a web help version, a PDF and EPUB, a mobile, and a help file, and I've got it for 4 different types of outputs. So 4 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 24 outputs here from one source. And if I need to change the source, I change it, and I manually create all 24 outputs, or I take advantage of something like AEM, etc., and I say build. And I just say, go ahead and build every single Thursday at 2 a.m. so that Friday morning we can come in, make sure the build was successful. If it was, we get the rest of the day off. If it wasn't, we troubleshoot, we fix it, we do the build, because Sunday night, our time, the team in India or in China is going to start reviewing and implementing it with a product build. And on Tuesday and Wednesday, our time, we're going to see what they've done. And we make some changes and tweaks, and Thursday we repeat. And we do this for 2 or 3 weeks, product rolls out the door. All of the content exists as small discrete units of information. Here's a bunch of concepts about the crew area or the overview or the vehicle structure. Here's a specific reference on launch and landing site and what it requires, its spaceship requirements. Here's the task on how to recline the seat. Very small, very discrete pieces of information. We can assemble them any way that we want. And if you consider how modular some of the things are that you do in business, this is one of the ways that you could take advantage of reuse. If you have a part, we do work with a couple of clients in aerospace and in train transportation, and they have, I think, LRUs, line replace units, and another piece. It's basically this controller that I'm holding up for the projector. If it breaks, you don't replace one of the buttons, you replace the controller. That's a replaceable unit. If it turns out that this works with 3 different projectors, do you want to write it 3 times? No. And if it turns out that it's 3 projectors and you sell them in 15 different countries in 15 languages, you don't want to manage it 45 times. So you have all your source in English once. If it's in small modules, you can go in and you can say, oh, this thing, which is just a sticker over top of it, we've now changed that button so that it's actually raised and imprinted right onto the button because we realized people were wearing it off over time. Wouldn't it be nice to just rewrite that one component, plug it into the documentation for the remote, and automatically all 3 of them for the projector types get updated, and automatically all of those trigger a workflow that says, hey, translate the updated information for this one piece and rebuild our 45 instances of output. That's where companies should be going and hopefully are going. And that's where I say you're not cutting, you're improving. I hate hearing politicians say, oh, we're going to fix it by finding efficiencies, because they almost always mean we're going to get rid of people. I went in, I did work with Social Security Administration years ago. They have large 11 by 17 books that they publish. They have the 8.5 by 14 and 8.5 by 11. They publish them for every state. It comes from a database. They had been pulling the information, putting it into an Excel spreadsheet from a database, taking the Excel spreadsheet, bringing that into a Word environment, setting up headers, footers, etc., publishing all of the information for all the states, and then distributing. I did a demo for them. I showed them FrameMaker with something very similar to an XML-based publishing setup. In around 3 or 4 hours of demonstration, I took their data, I set up a workflow, I published. I said, here's your PDF. I said, you've also got these other books. Let's just do a data dump, pull it in. Here it is, here it is, here it is. I gave them 6 books in a day. They said, how long would it take to set it up so that it's right? I said, like, assuming everything? They said, yeah, assuming it all. I'm in a room with about 20 people. I said, if everything was set up, it might take 3 or 4 months to do your initial setup, and then I could publish within a day for any of the stuff that you need. And they sort of looked around and they said, right now it takes all of us 9 months to do this once. And I thought, now I'm going to get killed, because there's 20 people whose yearly job is to create this stuff. I thought, this is not going to end well. And one of the ladies in the room, she started smiling. She says, this is awesome. I said, yeah, it's why is it awesome? She said, do you know how much changes in the US in 9 months between when we send this stuff to when we pull the data and when we finally can print? You can have an election. You can have a hurricane. You can have a war. You can have a company like Enron vanish, and that's going to change the numbers in any given area. She said, so what we could do now is we could start publishing this once a month and hand it out to the states, and they could have current information. And now they've gone online with it as well. Yeah, absolutely. And what we could do is start putting together subsets. We could come up with information. And all of a sudden they looked at it and they didn't say, how do we cut back? They said, how do we expand what we offer? And that's what companies should be doing. This takes a lot more time to set up. But at the end of the day, what I'm offering is to go into a company and say, look, I can take one source of content. I can create 24 sets of output in the same time that it takes you to create one using the same resources. Give or take. Yeah, question, comment.
No, that's a big question, the setup.
The setup.
Looking at this, okay, so years ago, when I did our health system, I pulled a whiteboard. I pretty much laid it out on a whiteboard.
Yeah.
Before I went in and started setting up the online health. I mean, what's a good way to take, like, say, if we have all our stuff and start moving towards this and we can like sketch it out on a whiteboard?
To a degree, you'd probably want to do some of the planning. The nice thing is, so I don't know if you heard the question. The question was, how long would it take, I'm paraphrasing and let me know if I get it right. How long would it take to plan this and what do we have to do if we want to move our current FrameMaker environment over? So as a generalization, what you could be doing is looking at, like I'm looking at the content Rockwell had, that's going to be a while. Only because there's so many different moving parts and types of documentation. If we turn around and we say, oh, here's, it turns out that we do a user guide, an owner's manual, and a quick reference guide. We have 3 sets of materials. And we have 5 different products. How long will it take? My questions would be, how similar are the manuals? Are they using the same templates? Do they have a style? Yeah, it's all written in the same way, etc. We've done client conversions from unstructured to structured, start to end, everything for 500 pages or 5,000. It doesn't matter if it's consistent to begin with. And those conversions could be between a week and a month for everything, including setting up their template, all of it. We've had other clients that have 500 or 5,000 pages, and it takes a year and a half because it's all inconsistent, etc. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I've got boxes and boxes and boxes of parts, can you build me a car? If you're automotive and you know what you're doing, you can look at it and go, let me see the parts. And you go, all right, and they open up, and it is a workshop that's 1,000 square feet of space, and it's piled floor to ceiling with 6 boxes. And inside these bins, there's just dump loads of parts. It's going to take you forever. If you go into the same idea and they have 10 times as many parts, but they're all clearly labeled, identified, you have the instructions, you can go through and say, yeah, I can build one a day. And you just start build, 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 build. And as a matter of fact, you get to the point where you say, I'm building, but I'm not going to do the engine assembly. I'll have somebody else do the engine assembly because they do it better and faster. So you build the rest of it, drop in an engine, build the rest, drop in an engine. It becomes assembly line if you have that consistent starting point. So that becomes more important than anything else. How consistent, how good is the initial piece? And the other is how complex is the finished piece you're looking at? If at the end of the day, what you're building is a mass production vehicle and it's a very basic structure to that vehicle, you're mass producing bicycles. I can build bicycles way faster if I'm mass producing them because there's fewer parts than I can build Ford F-150s. And if Ford tooled up the production line in order to build bicycles, they could build those faster than an F-150 because there's just fewer parts at the end of the day. It's just the F-150 is more profitable, more useful in that volume. So it depends, becomes part of the answer. And that's where content analysis, et cetera, sitting down with writers, looking at what they're doing, all becomes part and parcel of the discussion. But generalization, if I had to totally knee-jerk based on the stuff that I saw at Rockwell, first off, you're going to want to get your writers comfortable with the idea that they're going to be moving over to it. So you've got the people side of things to manage. The other is the content itself, and I would guess that a demo of some of the content could be built in a week or so. One manual could probably be converted in give or take a month or so, and an entire line of products maybe a year or so. Give or take knee-jerk based on a couple of hours of seeing it on screen. Other questions? All right. All right, in that case, for the people who are remote, I'm going to ask you to stay on the call for a minute here. I just want to wrap up and then hang around after we wrap up and stop the recording for just a few minutes. But again, I just want to throw out a thanks, Bob, for at STC working on getting this stuff started, Adobe for helping to sponsor it, Star for looking after the food and the snacks. Thanks from me to everybody. Hopefully there's been some useful ideas. I want to show you a few more things afterwards, but I think I want to do it off of the recording just because some of it is really cool stuff that isn't public yet. So for those of you that are here, it's a little bit of a bonus just to see one or two incredibly cool things. So thanks everybody for participating.